Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Attracting Young Top Talent Breakout session. We're so glad to have all of our attendees join us today for virtual Groundbreak 2021. Before we dive in, I just want to give a forward-looking statement. We're not going to read the whole thing, but just so you know, you should not place undue reliance on forward-looking statements as predictions of future events. And with that said, let me formally introduce myself. My name is Alex Williams. I'm the community manager here at Procore. I've been at Procore for about 4 years now, and I've been leading and managing Procore community for the past 2 years. I have a passion to help build the global construction community, to provide a space for everyone in the industry to collaborate, learn, and inspire one another. Now, I'm honored to have the opportunity to facilitate this important discussion today. All of us have probably felt the effects of the current labor shortage in our industry, and we're going to dive into the perspectives of a few young, but I should probably say younger professionals pertaining to this problem. So before we get into some of the details, I do want to introduce you to our panel. So it's my pleasure to welcome and introduce you to 3 members of our panel today. I'm going to have them introduce themselves one by one. So Burrell, let's start with you. If you can share your name, your company, title, and number of years in the industry, that would be great.
Hello, my name is Porel Netamzam. I work at HIT Contracting in Project Solutions Associate role. I've been in the industry for a little under a year now.
Perfect. Thanks, Burrell. And Casey, let's swing it over to you.
Hi, I'm Casey Mckendree. I've been in the industry for about 10 years, heavily involved in AGC all the way from local, statewide to national in the diversity and inclusion, CLC, emerging leaders in utility and infrastructure divisions. I am currently working for Colossal Construction as the CEO.
Perfect. And Brandon, how about you?
Thank you, Alex. My name is Brandon Montalo. I work with Hensel Phelps Construction. We're a nationally ranked general contractor with offices throughout the United States, focused in the more Northern California region, specifically on healthcare construction, as well as active member in AGC and emerging leaders with Casey. I'm a project superintendent out here, and I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. So before we begin asking our panel some questions, let me provide some more context for the session. With the labor shortage being one of the largest issues facing our industry, we're asking this question: how can companies best position themselves to attract young, top talent? As I mentioned, in this session, our panel is going to share about their journeys into construction, what they were looking for in a company, and how the industry can adjust to recruit and hire young top talent. So please take notes as you're going to get a unique glimpse into what new talent in the industry is looking for. So let me start here on this slide. In a Procore survey from April 2021, we collected responses from over 1,400 construction management, architecture, and engineering students from across the USA. And in this survey, we found a bunch of things, but we'll start here. About 68% wanted to work at a company or an office that has a diverse group of employees in terms of race, gender, sexual orientation, et cetera. 81% felt it was important to work for a company that gives back by doing good for society. 40% ranked work-life balance, meaning an adequate vacation time off, flexibility to work from home, et cetera, as the company perk or benefit that mattered the most to them. And when we asked, in considering whether you'd stay at a company over the long run, meaning 2 to 3 years or more, what matters most to you? 53% say career growth and development opportunities, while the next highest answer, which was around 17%, said having a sense of purpose or being an empowering work culture where I can be my authentic self. Now, I'll say this, while none of us would ever say that pay isn't important, these results are giving us glimpses into the things that the next generation cares about when entering into the workforce. So with that said, we're going to turn to our panel to hear from them about their experience, along with young professionals' experience entering into the industry, and what companies can adjust to attract and hire young talent. So I want to hear about all y'all's journey. I'd love to start with Burrell here. Burrell, can you tell us about your journey into construction and how you developed an interest in this industry?
Yeah, I was born in Cameroon in Central West Africa, and I essentially just growing up in a developing country. You're essentially surrounded by new construction all the time. And that's kind of how my interest in construction developed. And because I just thought the buildings were so cool and the entire process seemed really appealing to me. And after moving to the United States, I just kind of followed that direction and decided to stick with it, going on to University of Maryland to study civil engineering.
Love that. Thank you, bro. Casey, how about you? Share us a little bit of your journey.
I majored in civil engineering and got an internship through a friend to a construction company, fell in love with construction, realized that was the path for me, and continued on with a few other companies. I've worked at airports, I've worked on highways, bridges, water treatment plants. I've worked in 12 states. And as you can tell, I have a need for variety and I enjoy it.
Wonderful. Brandon, yourself?
Yeah, much like Casey, I also studied civil engineering out here in Northern California. Actually had a passion for structures and design. And when I went into design as a major, joined a student organization, AGC student chapter at the university, and they took me out on a job site tour where I fell in love with the dynamic environment and the change and the variety, and actually seeing the work and effort be built and brought up into a final product. So I fell in love with it and continued my passion there, and joined on with Hensel Phelps right after graduation, and I've been here for 10 years now.
Awesome. Great. So I want to get into a little bit about that process of actually getting to the company you're currently at. I'm curious, and Burrell, again, we'll start with you here. Were you recruited by your current company, or did you need to search them out?
I actually had to seek out the company. I graduated during the COVID-19 pandemic, and obviously because of the changing environment, I had to readjust sort of how I was going about the I guess finding employment. But I did have to seek out HIT contracting.
Thanks for sharing that. Casey, yourself, obviously you've been with a couple different companies now, but can you share a little bit about, were you recruited by the companies that you worked for, or did you also have to search them out?
The first company that I got into construction, I found out from a friend. They were looking for just another intern, and they asked him if he had anyone who would be interested. The second company was actually through an organization, the ASCE. We had an email or a meeting, and somebody had mentioned that the second company was looking. And I was also thinking about doing another internship during the school year. So that was an easy fit, and luckily it was a great one. I stayed with them for 6 years. And then the third company, it was more word of mouth, looking for a certain company culture that fit what I wanted to be as I grew into adulthood.
Perfect. Brandon, yourself, when it comes to working for Hensel Phelps, were you recruited by your current company, searched them out? Tell us about that process.
Yeah, I had no connections or family members in the construction industry, so I had to rely on my studies and university with my networking and contacts through my program at San Jose State to really find a fit. And through the same student chapter that actually got me into and passionate about construction, I saw the companies that were also active on the AGC board. I kind of followed on their footsteps of job site tours and lunch-ons and lunch and learns with those companies to really get a feel for them and of who they are, and ended up seeing Hensel Phelps being a very active member in that group, and latched onto them, and ended up getting recruited by them through my AGC student chapter leadership. As I grew with the student organization, I took on a president role at the student chapter, and from there I was actually recruited from Hensel Phelps. Still had to go through the formal interview process, but they actually were the first ones to approach me.
Got it. Okay, thank you all for sharing. That's really good insight. I want to hear next about what you were all looking for in a company. So again, Casey, let's start with you on this. When it comes to what you were looking for in a company, did that include the company's culture, mentorship, professional development? I'm curious what you were looking for in a company.
Well, each of the companies I've worked for have been a different stage of life, so it was kind of a bit different. The first one was to get my foot in the door in the industry. And luckily I fell into a great company that really made me fall in love with construction, and they had a great company culture. It just was a bit too far from where I was schooling wise to be able to continue on. The second company, it was more or less trying to make the change into a real role and get my resume built. And I loved the work culture at the time, but I definitely realized, and that was what the change for me, and I think it still is in my new venture, is that the work culture was huge of, does it fit my life? I looked around and I just looked at the employees, and you can tell what quality of work-life balance, as well as how those who are promoted and why they're promoted. So it speaks volumes.
Perfect. Brandon, let's head on over to you next. What were you looking for in a company?
Yeah, similar in KC as well, with kind of culture and work-life balance, and kind of understanding the company and where they stand in the industry. So I was looking for leadership in the industry. I was looking for ownership. I really am passionate about having a stake in the ownership of the company, and as an employee-owned company, that was a big push for me towards Hensel Phelps. As well as the training. Obviously, the company's got to set you up for success, right? That way you can kind of continue that same trajectory for the company as you grow with the company, which ties into the career path that Casey mentioned earlier. Also giving back while I was while I was studying civil engineering in the AGC student chapter. Hensel Phelps and other companies were very active in their volunteer efforts, and they would have us as a student chapter help volunteer for hours at a camp in Cupertino or somewhere else with, say, Habitat for Humanity or Rebuilding Together, those types of organizations. So seeing that and those passion of those employees coming out was a huge factor as well. And then the professionalism. So when I was interviewing for my final entry-level career, I went through a few companies for interviews, and just the overall professionalism of how many people that I get to talk to really get a feel for the culture. How organized were they? One example, I don't want to name the client or the contractor, but I walked into an office and the paperwork was stacked as high as the guy's forehead. And I was just like, no, not really what I want to get into. I want to be a little more in a controlled environment and on top of things. So those are the main things that I was looking for when I was joining on with Hensel Phelps.
I love that. Burrell, your journey into the industry is obviously a little bit different, especially during the hiring process. I mean, you were looking for a job during a global pandemic. It almost seems like when searching for a company, things like, culture or mentorship might take a back seat, because at the end of the day, we're just looking to get a job. But I'm curious for you, in the midst of searching for a job during a pandemic, what were you primarily looking for in a company?
Yeah, exactly. Graduating during the pandemic, as you mentioned, it becomes really easy to get desperate and sort of take the first thing that comes at you. But despite all that, I was still determined to find a company that had a culture of innovation and that was future focused, especially on the technology standpoint. And that was exactly what I found here at HID. That was perhaps the biggest thing that attracted me to the company.
I love that. Thank you. Now, when it comes to the hiring process, Casey, we're going to start with you again. Can you share a little bit about what your hiring process was like? Was there in-depth onboarding experience, so on and so forth? Go.
No, that's actually a funny subject. So the last company that I worked for, we basically threw everybody to the wolves. You got a laptop, a phone, and a pat on your back. Good luck. Here's your job. We all realized, a lot of us overachievers, that was not the right way to set us up for success on employee retention, as well as our projects. So we worked with the executives, creating an onboarding process that actually gave quick tutorials. We partnered the executives so that once a month they would take out all the new hires, because it could be a full year before they might get to see the executives just based on their schedule, and have that touch point so that they have the relationship if they have a question or something that they could actually go to. And we also gave them full office tours, job sites. Once they got to their job site, they were kind of given a tour around, and we basically did a little more training wheels in the beginning so that they were set up for success. And the retention improved by 30%.
Amazing. Brandon, this one's coming to you next. You somewhat alluded to this earlier about a job site visit, but again, your hiring process of kind of what sold you during that whole journey into the company. Can you share a little bit about what that hiring process was like?
Sure. Yeah. Like I said earlier, I think the journey was how much integration and insight you can get into the culture of the company as you are interviewing for said company. So Hensel Phelps, back in about a decade ago, we were, as a student chapter, a group of students would be invited to a job site tour on the first day. We'd tour their local project, go out to lunch, and then head back. If you were local, you just went home, and if you were traveling, you'd be put up in a hotel. And then after that, you'd actually come back the next day for a round robin interview with a very good mix of diverse leadership within the company. So from project managers to project superintendents, all the way up to the vice president or operations managers, to get a good feel for the leadership all the way up the ranks. And that was kind of the process of how they did it back then. And nowadays we have a very similar setup, but we also added onboarding towards once you are hired on. There's a full day of onboarding activities while you get your cell phone and computer, and then you go out to the job the following day to kind of get an orientation on the job that you'll be working on.
Got it. Thank you. I'm going to switch to this next question here around, what do you think young professionals coming out of school care the most about when looking for a company to apply to? Burrell, you're the freshest out of school here, so I'm going to start with you. Share some of your insights there.
As I mentioned, one thing that was really important to me was finding a company that was focused on innovation and that had a long-term view of the industry. And speaking with other people my age that graduated around the same time, that's certainly something that's very important to them as well. They want to work with a company that is going to be around essentially in 20 years, and it's not going to become obsolete because they didn't keep up with technology. And on top of that, they want to work for a company where they feel like there's a greater purpose or a bigger mission at hand.
Beautiful. Casey, you have some unique insight into this as well, working with AGC and some young professionals. Can you share with us what you think young professionals coming out of school are looking for in a company?
Yeah. So young professionals, from what I've heard through my recruitment at AGC, a lot of people want to know, one, work culture, as well as upward mobility and growth. Is there a plan? Is it communicated clearly? Or is it kind of haphazardly? The haphazardly is a huge deterrent to incoming students, as well as just anybody even switching into the industry without knowing somewhat of a path and a guideline. I know contractors, especially, I've heard it time and time again. We don't want to make promises because we don't want them at year 5 to expect to be a project manager or a superintendent, because what if there's not a job available or something like that? We'll have it as a guideline. And that way it allows you a flexibility to show them and introduce them to people who are examples. And that's what we mainly did in our recruitment processes, and we're successful. Our intern also, she's a sophomore now, and she had basically been looking at work culture. She was like, I noticed what time you leave, and is this normal for project managers? I noticed the time that the project engineers leave. Is that normal? The superintendent. And so when you have interns as well, they're interviewing you. So don't forget that if they don't stay, it's because it's not the right fit potentially.
That's great. Casey, I want to stay with you on this for our last question because it rolls right into this. What could the construction industry do better to attract young top talent?
Wow, I'm so excited that you asked me that. I'm really passionate about this. So the construction industry tends to want to be the same, not changing, very dependable, but in that we're not allowing to modernize and be competitive with other markets and other industries. So for the construction industry to stay viable, we have to get creative with our compensation. And I'm not talking about signing packages or actual salary, but perks that you can offer your employees to attract them. One recently that a lot of people had to experience was work from home. And that really has alleviated a lot of issues for people and helped with that whole work-life balance. So if you can create some kind of a hybrid, maybe 1 day a week, it also reduces the amount of time that your employees are spending out there on the roads, and additional risk for you. So it's a win-win as long as it's not a detriment to their actual job duties. But there are tons of other ways. And if you look up things of creative compensations or other perks that you can offer, that's a great way to stay competitive.
I love that. Yeah, thank you for bringing that one up. That's really good. Brandon, we'll end this with you. When it comes to what the construction industry could do better to attract young top talent, what's some of your insights there?
Yeah, I think retaining and recruiting some of the best talent in the industry takes a drive to establish and communicate your culture. And that's throughout the entire ranks and pretty much continuously, even on the new hire process, like Casey talked about earlier about interns are interviewing you just as much as you're interviewing them for a full-time job. So making sure you're constantly communicating that culture and getting feedback from your employees. So Hensel Phelps does a great job of sending out a survey once a year and then responding and releasing a video, or even it used to be in person. Sorry, I'm so used to this COVID pandemic type thing, but this year was a video of the results of the survey and what they plan to do differently or where to grow, but also strong points and what we're doing correctly. So reputation's another good one. We all know it takes years and decades to build the reputation of a company and minutes to kind of ruin one. So which all kind of ties together to your overall brand as a company. So making sure your brand is clean and reputable out in the industry, and that's what's going to get you the best talent and be able to retain that talent, taking care of your people.
I love that. I think to kind of recap some of the main things that we addressed today, and we talked about being creative with your compensation, looking for companies that are innovating with technology. We've got culture and mentorship involved, and so there's a lot of things which I'm so grateful for you all to share that companies can do to adjust their recruiting and hiring practices. So Burrell, Casey, Brandon, I can't thank you enough for sharing, for taking time today to give our industry insight into what young top talent is looking for in a company and how we can adjust to that. Lastly, I'll just say this to everybody that tomorrow at the 10:10 breakout session, there's going to be a part 2 to this conversation called Up-Leveling Your Recruiting Process with a different panel. So definitely check that out. And with that said, thank you to everyone for your time and enjoy Groundbreak 2021. Thanks so much.